All right. Everybody get out a sheet of paper, and number 1 through 5, we're going to have a pop test. When I was in school, I hated to hear those words. I hated. Do you remember that? The bell would ring, you're talking to your friend, you sit down in your desk, and all of a sudden the teacher gets up and says those dreaded words. We're going to have a pop test. Ow! Hated it. Didn't like it. So I'm not going to give you a pop test right now, but we are going to have a multiple choice test, okay? Is that all right? You don't have to study for it. Don't worry, okay? Everybody's going to be able to guess. Write the answers down on a piece of paper or put them in your mind, but don't shout them out loud. And whatever you do, don't cheat. This is church, come on. All right, so here we go. I'm going to read you some quotes. And then I want you to guess who said these quotes, all right? And it's A, B, C, or D, all right? Here we go. Pretty serious quotes, actually, so transition here. It said, I am now the most miserable man living. If what I feel were equally distributed to the whole human family, there would not be one cheerful face on earth. I would say this guy is having a bad day. Who said that? A, Bill Buckner. Some of you need to look that up later. B, Richard Nixon. Not a crook. C, Job. Or D, Abraham Lincoln. Record the answer in your mind. Don't say it out loud. Next quote. Jesus has a very special love for you, but as for me, the silence and the emptiness is so great that I look and do not see. I listen and do not hear. Who said that? A, Benjamin Franklin. B, Elton John. C, Billy Graham. Or D, Mother Teresa. Record the answer now. One more quote. It's a tough one. I've had enough. Take my life. I've got to die sometime, and it might as well be now. Who said that? A, William Wallace. B, Butch Cassidy. C, Edgar Allan Poe. Or D, Elijah the prophet. All right. Let's check our papers quickly. It's pretty simple. The answer to all 3 questions is the letter D. Abraham Lincoln, Mother Teresa, and Elijah. Now, let's think about that. What does that tell you? It tells you that the greatest president in the history of our country, the most admired woman in modern history, Mother Teresa, and the most powerful prophet in the Old Testament who made a reappearance in Luke 11 in the New Testament, the Transfiguration, Elijah. These 3 influential, powerful, godly men and women dealt and battled depression. Things got so bleak and so dark and so heavy in their life that they did not want to carry on. Depression is something that most of us will have to deal with in our life. 1 in 4 Americans will battle depression at some point in their life. We are the most depressed nation on the planet. There's only one segment, one demographic in the United States population that really has 0 levels of depression, and I'll tell you what that is later on. But most of us know what it's like to be depressed. Some of us here deal with a chemical imbalance, and depression is something we battle our entire lives. Some of us here are going through a season of depression right now, where we don't want to carry on, where life has lost its meaning, where things feel hazy and gray and out of focus, and you feel a few steps removed from reality. Depression. We can't ignore it. We can't act like depression doesn't exist. I'm just going to snap my fingers and get out of this thing. I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. No matter if you're a president or a missionary or a mighty prophet of God, it doesn't work that way. So today we're going to talk about depression. And we're going to look at some unhealthy ways to deal with depression and some healthy ways to deal with depression. But we have to deal with depression, or depression will deal and have its way with us. Elijah knows a lot about depression. Elijah, on one hand, you would think he's the least likely candidate to be depressed. On the other hand, it kind of makes sense. When you look at Elijah's story, he was the guy who saw the miraculous power of God. He saw miracles that 99.9% of the human population will never see. He saw miracles. Also, too, Elijah lived in a society and in a nation that was literally cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. It was crazy. You think our world has gone crazy today and our country's gone crazy, things people are saying that are normal, that are absolutely abnormal and weird and crazy. Elijah faced the same thing, but Elijah was willing to take a stand in that culture, a stand for God, an unpopular stand. Now, he had just finished this incredible showdown on Mount Carmel that you probably heard about. It was Elijah versus these hundreds of Baal prophets, these pagan prophets. And they had this contest to see who was the real God. And Elijah prayed and called down fire from heaven. And Elijah prayed, and a drought that had been going on for 3.5 years ended. And Elijah won this major battle and routed the Baal prophets. So you think Elijah would be riding high. I mean, he is at the pinnacle of his career. He is at the apex of success. You think he would write the book, he'd be taking the victory tour, but we find himself so down, so depressed that he says, I've had enough. Take my life. I don't want to live. It may as well be today. What happened? Why is he in this dark place of depression? Look at 1 Kings chapter 19. If you have a Bible, open them up. If not, it'll be in front of you. Now, I'm reading out of the Living Translation today, the Living Bible. This is one of the first really modern paraphrases back in the 70s. I'm reading out of the Living Bible today because this is much more of a narrative passage, and I think it flows better than the ye, thou, thus saith King James. Here we go. Why was he depressed? And what does Elijah have to tell us about how to deal with depression? It says, when Ahab told Queen Jezebel what Elijah had done and that he had slaughtered the prophets of Baal, she sent this message to Elijah. You killed my prophets. Now I swear by the gods, I'm going to kill you by this time tomorrow night. So Elijah fled for his life. He just stood up to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Baal prophets. He just led a major revival as thousands of people turned back and trusted in God. He had just stared down death so many times, and now just one little death threat, one contract put out by Jezebel, and he is headed for the hills. Old Jezebel. The name just kind of sounds mean, doesn't it? Jezebel. She is out to get Elijah. Elijah runs, I'm out of here. He went to Beersheba, a city of Judah, and he left his servant there. Then he went on alone into the wilderness, traveling all day, and sat down under a broom bush, or maybe your translation says a juniper tree, and prayed that he might die. He said, I've had enough. God, take my life. I've got to die sometime. It might as well be now. Then he lay down and slept beneath the broom bush. We can see right off the bat that Elijah is in a very difficult, dark, depressing place. And we know he's not alone, because a lot of us has been there before, and we know what it's like when life gets so tough, when circumstances seem so bleak that we simply don't want to go on anymore. You would think he would be riding high with confidence and faith and victory, but sometimes after our greatest victory, after he won the big battle and showdown at Mount Carmel, sometimes after our great mountaintop experience, there's always that valley, that letdown. And we could be susceptible to depression. But right off the bat, Elijah is not handling the depression very well. He's doing the opposite of what we should do when we face depression. We see it here. He left his servant in Beersheba. He went out by himself to be alone in the wilderness. He basically isolated himself. He isolated himself from others. He isolated himself from his job, from his human connection, for his sense of purpose. He isolated himself, and that's when he continued to simply live inside of his mind, live inside of his head, so much that he felt like dying. There was a Harvard study conducted years ago on men and how they deal with depression. And the researcher discovered that what men do, he said, rather than deal with depression, they usually self-medicate. To enliven dead feelings by drinking or drugging or womanizing or burying themselves into work or overeating or overspending. The researcher goes on to talk about radical isolation occurs. They pull away from relationships and pull away from intimacy and pull away from life itself. This is what Elijah did. And this is what a lot of us do when we're faced with depression. Isolation. Being by yourself, alone in your thoughts, living inside of your mind, projecting out a worst-case scenario for today, for tomorrow, for next year, for your life, is not an effective way, a healthy way to deal with depression. I saw a story about a guy named Jake who, in his 20s, was struggling mightily with depression. But like Elijah, he kept it all inside. He kept it all inside. He didn't want anybody to know. So like a lot of us, he puts on the happy face until finally he got so desperate and so down that he said he did the toughest thing in his life. This kid did the toughest thing in his life. He said, I asked for help. I told someone that I'm dealing with depression and asked for help. He said, it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but it's by far the best thing I've ever done in my life. And it put him on a path of learning how to cope and how to battle and how to deal with that dark cloud of depression that had haunted him for so long. And that's what we have to do. We have to ask for help. Depression is not a situation that you're going to beat alone. It's not something that you're going to outthink. You're not going to outfox it. You've got to ask for help. And again, as we think about depression here today, we're on a continuum. For some people, asking help may mean tomorrow or today you call your doctor and get a checkup. You go see a good psychologist, a good counselor. You get help. You need to have a medical assessment. You need to do that. That's where some of us are. Others need to call a trusted friend. You need to tell a family member. You need to tell a pastor or someone, hey, listen, I am in a very difficult place. I've been stuck here for a long time, and I need some help. We got to ask for help. God didn't design us. He didn't design you. He didn't design me. He didn't create us to try to manage a lot of life's crises and depression all alone. Doesn't work that way. We got to ask for help. Elijah didn't do it. Elijah, like many of us, isolated himself, ran in the wilderness, went away from his friends, and found himself in a tough place, and he was sleeping and not moving. And let's see what happens next. Let's see if Elijah can take a step, if you would, into the light. Let's see what happens. Look at verse 5. It says, when he was sleeping, an angel touched him and told him to get up and eat. He looked around and saw some bread breaking on hot stones and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. Then the angel of the Lord came to him again and touched him and said, get up and eat some more, for there is a long journey ahead of you. So he got up and ate the food, and he got up and ate and drank, and the food gave him enough strength to travel for 40 days. That's a long, long journey. And 40 nights to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. And that's where the same mountain that God gave Moses the 10 Commandments. When he got there, he lived in a cave. But then the Lord spoke to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? So Elijah takes one step forward in dealing with depression, and he takes 2 steps backwards. The step forward was that he ate something. He got a good, healthy meal. He got some normal sleep. And then he got outside and he started moving. He went on that journey. He got some motion. Someone says that motion is lotion. So he did that. And that's a very positive step that Elijah made. But he made 2 steps backward. Because did you notice verse 9? It said, then once he got there, he moved into a cave. I don't know about you, but if I'm struggling with depression and going through that time in that season in my life, a cave is probably not the best place for me to live, a dark cave. No. So he made the positive step. He ate, he slept, he went outside, he went on a journey, he got his body moving, which is so critical when we're dealing with depression. But then he went to a cave. But then I thought about that a little bit as I read and studied this passage. I said, that's kind of like us, though, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? So let's say we're here today and we're struggling with depression, and we hear this message, and God speaks to us through the story of Elijah, and we go, man, I've got to do something. So we ask for help. We tell someone, man, I'm struggling with depression. I've lost my sense of purpose in life. I've lost that will to really carry on. I feel tired. I feel heavy. I don't want to get out. And so maybe you do something positive. You do get help. You do access that. But then you do go back into your shell. Well, that's kind of the way we all do it. We don't just, automatically just pop out of something. Dealing with a problem many times and dealing with the situation as debilitating as depression can be is kind of a 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards. It's kind of a dance like that in order to pull out of it. We can't just snap out of it, Come on, smile, be happy, do these things. It doesn't work that way. That's not real. That's not life. So Elijah's doing that. 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards. If you study people, medical doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists who work with people who are depressed, they will tell you that another effective way to deal with depression is to get moving outside. You got to move outside. Now, I don't mean you have to literally move outside, go to REI and get a tent. No, I'm not saying that. It means we need to somehow, if we're dealing with depression, pray, God, give me the strength to get up out of bed. God, give me the strength to get up out off this couch and to turn off Netflix. God, give me the strength to simply get up and to go outside and to get some sunlight, some vitamin D, to get that serotonin firing, those chemicals firing in my brain again. God, help me to do that, because when depression knocks you down on the ground and you're on the floor or you're in the bed, sometimes just getting up is a monumental task. That's why the first thing is so critical, that we ask for help, but we also ask for God's help. God, help me to get up, help me to get outside, help me to get moving. I read about a researcher at Essex University in Britain, and they have a new therapy called ecotherapy. And ecotherapy is helping people deal with depression by simply getting them outdoors, getting them to walk, getting them to get involved in something that's giving back to others or some type of conservation project. A study of about 108 people who were dealing with depression said that 71% said they felt better simply by going on a half an hour walk outside. I think one of the reasons we're so depressed in our nation today and in churches today is because we spend way too much time indoors. We spend way too much time looking and staring at a screen. Scroll through, Insta jealousy or Facebook, and it don't make anybody depressed, right? You compare your life to their life, what? And yet we keep going back over and doing that over and over again. The invasion of technology, our disconnection from the earth and from the cycles and from seasons and from being outside can lead us into a place of depression. We've got to move, get moving, and get moving outside. So Elijah, where is he in this part of the story? He has made the positive step of movement. He's gone on the 40-day journey. He's been outside, but he's in a dark cave. Still feeling empty. Still feeling like he doesn't want to go on. So God says to Elijah, God meets him in the midst of his depression. I love that. God meets him in the midst of his depression, and God meets us in the midst of our depression, in the midst of our despair. God still speaks to us and communicates to us. So he says, Elijah, I want you to get up and go to the entrance of the cave here. I'm going to show you something. So the first thing that happens there is that there's this mighty windstorm. Whoosh, this is blowing everywhere. And Elijah's thinking, maybe this is a sign. Maybe this is God. But he says, no, God's not in the wind. Then there's a California earthquake. Boom, it starts shaking and quaking. And he says, maybe God is communicating me through this quake, but God was not in the earthquake. Then there was a fire. Surely that's God speaking to me through the fire, but God was not in the fire. And then there's a still, small voice. A still, small voice that Elijah hears. This voice whispers to Elijah. Think about it. God Almighty, who spoke the world and the universe into existence, knows where Elijah is, feels where he is, and doesn't overpower him, but gently whispers to Elijah, who's stuck in the dark cave of depression. He says, Elijah, why are you here? Why are you here? I've got something for you to do. I've got some people, Elijah, you need to meet with. I've got another plan for you. Elijah, check and see if you have a pulse, because if you have a pulse, you still have a purpose in my team. So how do we come out and deal with depression? We have to get back into the game. And that's what the Lord does for Elijah. Look at verse 15. It said he told him, go back to the desert road to Damascus. There's a guy there, Hazael. Anoint him to be king of Syria. There's another guy there, Jehu. Anoint him to be king of Israel. There's another guy there who I want you to mentor. His name is Elisha. Work with him. Teach him. Elijah, my man, get back in the game. God doesn't want us to stay in that cave. As dark as it is, as tough as it is, as heavy as things are, God is saying to you that you're going to make it through that because God has something else for you to do. He still has plans. He still has a purpose for you to accomplish in your life, just like Elijah. Think about life is a fight sometimes. Last night there was a big fight in Las Vegas, several fights. And when you watch the fights, when someone's fighting after they have gone those 5 minutes in the round, they'll go back to their corner. And when they get into the corner, have you noticed there are all these other people there? There's someone there that's helping them, bandage up their cuts because they're bleeding over their eye. There's someone else that's taking an ice compress because they have a big giant hematoma and bruise on the other eye. And then there's another person looking at them and giving them water and saying, breathe, breathe. Another person saying, hey, you need to do this with your hands and feint and fake. Another person saying, you need to do this with your footwork. They have all these people in their corner. All these people that are helping this tough guy or this tough gal stay in the fight. And if you look at the people in the corner, look at them. Look at their ears. Look at their noses. They're former fighters. They've been there. They're done that. So what they're speaking to that fighter is coming from a place of experience and truth. And they're saying, hey, stay in the fight. Get back in the game. There's more for you to do. And that's when I think about our church and our church family. There's so many people, men and women and young people who have battled and fought depression. And they're now on the other side. And they can be in your corner. They can be in your corner. They can help speak God's truth and His wisdom and His hope into your life. And they've already been through it. They have the scars and the bruises to prove it. So Elijah gets back in the game. He doesn't isolate himself anymore. He finds that community and he finds that task that God wants him to do. And he starts to pull out of that depression and the dark place and that lonely cave that he found himself in. We have to ask for help. We have to move our bodies and get outside, and we have to get back in the game. God has more for us. He does. Do you remember earlier in the beginning of this message, I said there's one group of people in the United States that has virtually no depression, one demographic? Do you remember that? Do you remember? I didn't tell you it was. Kind of mean. All right. Let's have one more multiple choice question. Let's try to figure out which group that is. Perhaps we can learn from them. All right, let's see. Here it is. Depression has affected every major segment of society except one. Name the major demographic depression has not affected. All right, you ready? Which group is it? Group of people. A, Republicans. B, Democrats. C, Hollywood celebrities. They've got it all figured out. They have not dealt with depression. Is that it? Think about your answer. D, evangelical Christians. Or E, none of the above. How many of you say D? Any some D's in here? D's. A couple of D's. How about E's? Any E's? None of the above? Wow, we have a smart group here, of course, E. It is none of the above. Do you know the group, a significant number of people in our society that has virtually no sign, no levels of what's considered depression by experts? You're never going to guess. The Amish. Check it out. When you're going in the car, Google me. The Amish. The Amish. How is that? Well, one reason they're probably not looking at their smartphone a lot. I can guarantee you that. And it's probably not because they love barns and they loathe buttons. That's probably not why they're not depressed. I would say they don't deal with depression because they have a deep sense of community. Their social connections are really, really strong and tight. Heck, they're married to their third cousin, so, they're tight. Second of all, they're outside a lot. When you don't have electricity, you need that sunlight, you need that vitamin D. They're outside a lot. They're moving a lot. They're in touch with the earth. They're doing manual labor. And number three, they know God, and they know that God has a purpose and a plan for their life. Maybe that's why, unlike the rest of us, they don't struggle with depression like we do. Perhaps we could learn something from the Amish. I'm not saying we need to move to Pennsylvania to a farm. I'm not saying that. But maybe we could learn from our brothers and sisters who are doing it differently. You know, what I'm talking about today is not a sermon. This is not a sermon. If you look, man, this is not a sermon. What I've been talking about today, it's my life. I've lived it. I would not be here today completing one single sentence in English if during a time of depression in my life, I didn't reach out for help. I didn't talk to people in this congregation and say, hey, I'm going through a tough time, a difficult time. I'm in that cave. I need help. And if I didn't listen and take their counsel, I would not have made it through. I'm not just the president of the Hair Club for Men. I'm also a client. That's what I'm trying to say. And I want to encourage you here today that there is light at the end of that tunnel. If you ask for that help, if you get connected in community and allow people to walk with you and let the Lord meet you there. Pray with me. Father, I thank you that you're a good God. I thank you that you are patient with us. I thank you that you meet us in the valley and you meet us in the brokenness. Maybe more sometimes, God, than when we're on top of the world and think that we're all that. And so, God, I thank you for the friends and the counselors and the people in my life that have helped me and continue to help me deal with depression and getting down. And God, I thank you for Elijah. I thank you for this story in 1 Kings chapter 19 that gives us these tools on how to deal with depression. God, thank you that you come to give us life. You've come to shine light in the dark places. God, I thank you that we need each other. We all do. Everyone here does. And God, I thank you for this church family. I think of this community of people, these fighters who have been through many storms and are helping others. And God, I pray right now for people who are here who need to stand and walk down front, who need to join this church. They need to be a part of the community, and you're leading them to do that. So, Father, right now I pray for single-parent families. I pray for couples. I pray for families and students and singles who need to stand boldly in just a few moments and walk down these aisles and say, today is the day. Today's the day I'm joining this church. Today's the day I'm sinking my roots down in this soil and this family. God, may they have that courage to stand and to walk down these aisles today. Lord, other people here need to find you. They need to reconnect with you. They need to know, and they want to know how to do that. God, may they stand and come and make their way down front. God, this is our prayer. We give you this time of invitation. We ask these things in Jesus' name.